Good morning. If I can have your attention, we're going to go ahead and start. Thank you very much for being here, and welcome to the 12th Annual Coldwell Banker Commercial Forum. Today, we have a little bit different venue. We're going to have our keynote speaker speak first, and then another speaker, and then we will have a residential speaker, and then 4 of our commercial agents will be speaking on a number of different subjects. With that being said, I would like our commercial agents to all stand and acknowledge them, whether they're speaking today or not. They've all come together many, many, many hours to get good factual data to present to you, our customers. So, gentlemen and ladies, if you can stand up, we'd like to acknowledge you. Thank you. We'd like to start off today with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you can all stand, we'll lead you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Also, you don't have to take notes. This is being videoed, and it will be on our website in about 2 weeks, so feel free to go there on that. And then now, I get the great honor to introduce the founder and owner of Coldwell Banker, and I'm going to go back. Where's Kelsey? Go back. You took my slide down already. There we go. There we go. So for those of you that know Gary, and I think everyone in this room knows Gary, he went to Washington State. His parents were very involved with Washington State. All I ever hear is Washington State, and my oldest son graduated just recently with the master's degree from Washington State in criminal justice, and Gary really likes my oldest son. My other son went to Gonzaga. Gary really doesn't like him. So with that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce Gary Steinmiller.
I don't know if we have any Huskies in the crowd, but I apologize that we made you say the Pledge of Allegiance to 2 flags, not just one. So, just saying. Thank you all for being here. We so much appreciate your participation. The gentlemen and ladies from our commercial department work really hard to create a program that is designed to offer good information, honest information, accurate information that hopefully might help you in your decision-making process as you look at how to approach and attack the North Idaho market. We have done this now for 11 years. I have to say, 11 years ago, the market was not what it is today, and we probably had to work a little harder to manufacture some enthusiasm 11 years ago and 1 or 2 times since, but this time it is totally honest enthusiasm because we're facing a wonderful opportunity in a market that has become remarkable again. So for that, we're most appreciative. I know a couple of the people said to me coming in today that this was their 10th or 11th participation in our event. And for that, we're most appreciative that you've hung in there with us all of these years. I have the privilege now of introducing our sponsors whose help, without which we wouldn't be doing this. Most of them have literally been with us for all 11 years, and for that I'd like to personally say thank you. As I read your names, I'd like any representatives we may have here today from those companies to please stand and be recognized. First of all, Riverbend Commerce Park. I told Taggart Jacqueline as we started into this process, and thinking back 11 years ago, the first face that popped into my head was his dad, my very dear friend Dwayne Jacqueline, and how much I appreciated his support over the years and his continuing encouragement to do what we're doing. And we certainly miss him, but he's with us here today, And for that, I'm appreciative personally. Next up, Community First Bank. Thank you so much. Greenstone Homes. Next, Ramsden, Lyon, Ely, and Harris. Excuse me, that was Ramsden, Marfus, Ely, and Harris. I guess the first 8 years it was maybe the other name or something like that. That's still stuck in my head. Valbridge Property Advisors. Thank you. On the CPA side, Stephen McCaugan. I think Steve's here. Our friends from Pioneer Title who help us do a lot of different things over the year, and certainly no exception being this event. Range. And also the Spokane Journal of Business. Again, thanks so much to these sponsors. I hope you will say thank you to them as well as I'm doing right now. I am also pleased to introduce a guest who I think is here, and he is with Coldwell Banker Commercial, our national company, Rod Aragon. Is Rod here yet? Okay, so maybe he hasn't made it yet. Well, we'll say hi to him when he comes. Also, a guest that we were expecting, but just of late, and that is also part of my WSU connection and our WSU connection sort of as it relates to this event. We've had the pleasure of hiring a new athletic director who comes to Washington State with incredibly wonderful credentials, 10 years at Ohio State, the Ohio State University, excuse me. I think we are now the Washington State University, aren't we? Yes, we are. So we'll get that straightened out here in Kirk's tenure. And then also of late, the last number of years from Florida International University. Happy to have him on board at WSU. Would you like to stand up, Pat? I'm kind of tickled out of the entire crowd. He finds a guy with a cougar hat on to sit with, so that's a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing. It is my distinct and personal pleasure today to introduce our keynote speaker. He is Dr. Kirk Schulz. Dr. Schulz is the 11th president of Washington State University. He brings incredible credential to the alma mater I love. He comes with a set of goals that are remarkable, achievable, and to be pretty excited about if you're a Coug. One of which is to help Washington State become a top 25 research university. He has the plan in place, and he's going to execute that. Part of what he's going to be speaking about is probably an integral part of making that happen, and that being our new medical school. I've come to know Dr. Schulz and his wife Noelle over the last couple of years. We have some things in common. We both come from rural areas. We both have a love for land-grant universities and the wonderful things that they can do for a community, a state, and our country. He's a graduate of Virginia Tech. He is a huge college sports fan. I think he's a serial shopper, so we kind of have that in common. Happens that his son is my fraternity brother, but at Oklahoma State and marginally younger than I am. A couple things we don't have in common. He's much smarter than I am. He's a much better speaker. He loves camping and with his camping trailer. And the other thing, he holds numerous degrees, including degrees in principally in chemical engineering, which I don't even know what that means. If you're in real estate, you don't have that kind of a degree behind you, I think, maybe. But that being said, I'm so pleased to introduce Dr. Kirk Schulz, my friend, president of Washington State University.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I've got a little bit of a cold, so if I keep sipping water, that's the reason why. I will say to the Huskies in the room that had to stand up and see that beautiful Coug flag during the Pledge of Allegiance, I won't apologize for that. So what I'd like to do today is to share with you a little bit about this really interesting journey we are on at Washington State University around changing the face of healthcare in this region of the country. And it's a pretty remarkable story, and it certainly predates my time as president. But I want to give you some sense today of some of the exciting things that we're doing at WSU and in this region in particular that I think are going to have a significant impact on not just Washingtonians, but also folks in Idaho, and particularly northern Idaho. So healthcare, as we think about it, is really changing pretty dramatically across the country. I remember when the first non-invasive types of things took place, and it was pretty cool to get a CAT scan or something like that, and you had to go to one of these huge monster hospital complexes to get these best types of equipment. Now we see a lot of these things on the regional level, and I don't think there's another thing that has changed quite so much in my lifetime as what we can do in human medicine today, and it's exciting for us to be part of that. So this picture and all the pictures through here are not just fake medical students. That's what we had to use for a lot of years. Right now, these are our first medical students at WSU. They're just down the road here a little ways on our Spokane campus. One of the goals that we had starting off is not just to start another medical school. There's lots of reasons academically that it'd be great to have a medical school, but what we want to do is do something different. And we wanted to change the way, at least in this region, we were educating physicians, particularly for rural and underserved areas. And we use the term underserved a lot because, as many of you know, it can be a rural small community that is worried about where they're going to get their next general practitioner, next physician, next nursing, pharmacy staff. But it can also be in a large urban area that also is equally underserved. And so we want to make sure that we're basically helping to produce physicians that are going to serve in these types of areas. We also want to provide more Washingtonians with opportunity to earn a medical degree in state. And it turns out if we look to the west there, Washington is a growing state. We expect to add somewhere between 1 and 3 million people into the state over the next 10 to 15 years, especially heavily along the I-5 corridor. So we have this growing population, had a single medical school. And our medical school dean, who came from Chicago, likes to say we had 5 medical schools in Chicago, and the state of Washington is arguing about whether we should have a second one or not. So one of the things that my predecessor, President Elson Floyd, really carried the water on this was it wasn't just getting some money from the legislature to get this started. It required significant constitutional and legislative support to allow a second publicly funded medical school to even exist in the state. And those of you who might have known President Floyd, he was an extremely talented president, did a lot for WSU, but one of the things he was particularly good at was working with the legislature. And I don't think there's another college president in the country who could have managed in a very contentious environment to move through this approval for a new medical school, frankly, over the objections of a top 5 university in Seattle that is an outstanding university with an outstanding medical school, and to manage to do that in that particular fashion. So the milestone in April 2015, after an almost should say years-long effort by WSU, community leaders, healthcare industry, and legislators, we received approval to found the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine in Eastern Washington. That was monumental for us. And then the university went through a very difficult time because during this time frame, Elson passed away after a long battle with cancer. So you sort of got the approval to do it. You didn't really get any money at this particular point, but you got the approval to do it, and you're going through a senior leadership change at the university, have to hire a medical school dean, and all those things. Dan Bernardo, who was serving as the provost, stepped in as interim president for a year, kept us going, and then when I arrived, one of the first things that was on my list is, Kirk, it's time for you and our team to go to the legislature and actually start getting real money now to do this. So in fall of 2016, by this point I had arrived, we also were spending money. It's a startup operation, so we're like putting money in a big pile and lighting it on fire, right? I mean, we are just spending money left and right. But we did not yet have preliminary accreditation. You cannot even start admitting medical students to your program until you have preliminary accreditation. So here we are, we're spending all this money, we are hiring people left and right, you know, we're waving the flag on the medical school. I can remember we got the phone call from this particular group that said you received preliminary accreditation, and what that meant was only after that point could we actually accept applications for our first entering class. So it turns out we were recruiting 60 students. We can only open our recruitment up for 30 days. We had over 700 applications for 60 spots in that inaugural class. I asked our medical school folks one time, how many people can you just eliminate because they're not academically qualified, thinking that was going to be this big monster number. It was like 100. So that still means that you got 10 academically qualified young men and women for every single spot in that incoming medical school class. All residents at this point have to be, all of our medical students have to be residents of the state of Washington. Now, if people have military service and things like that, there's a set of criteria and you have to satisfy 3 of the 4. 1 in 3 of those first 60 are from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds. 1 in 5 is first-generation college grads. 57% of that entering class are female. And this is a national trend as we have more and more women in our medical school classes, and I think we're going to see that reflected. Now, interestingly, what we do with the way we admit medical students, and this caused a little consternation even internally at first, is you use the MCAT scores, their GPA and stuff like that, to narrow it down to several hundred. Then they do interviews, which are common, but guess what? The interview committees can't see their GPA, they can't see their MCAT, they can't see where they went to school. So what you have to do is you have to do those interviews, and I don't know if Kirk, spent some time at Harvard, went to where he grew up, those kind of things, and so you have to evaluate at that particular point based on how people answer the questions, how they do the interview, why they want to go into medicine, and you don't have this lingering thing that you say, I got 2 of you, one has a 4.0, one has a 3.8, so I'm sure the 4.0 would be a better doctor than the 3.8. That takes that out of it, and I think it's a unique way of building our particular class. Just if you were wondering, we're building the second class right now, had over 1,000 applications this time, again for 60 spots. So very, very competitive. So the way our medical school works is you spend the first 2 years here in this area at WSU Spokane. And then years 3 and 4 are spent at one of the WSU campuses around the state of Washington. So that means we're going to send 15 students for the years 3 and 4 to the Tri-Cities, 15 students to Vancouver, Portland, and then another 15 students will stay in Spokane. The final 15 go to our campus in Everett, sort of northern Seattle, if you will. So what's happening then is we're not just rotating those students through these other communities. They're living in the Tri-Cities for 2 years. They're getting to know that community. And the reason we want to do that is it would be great if they go back and practice in the Tri-Cities when they're done. But a sense is if you've got to live in a community and you get to know it, all of a sudden you don't say, well, gee, I got to be in King County, or I got to be in Boise, or I got to be in Denver to practice medicine. These other communities that may be smaller or more modestly sized, hey, it's a different family experience for me, and it can be an equally great opportunity to practice medicine. We're also trying to emphasize interprofessional collaboration. And, all of us have been sort of to the office where, you see a nurse, you see this person, and at least when I first went to doctors growing up, everything was sort of highly compartmentalized. Today, we want patients and people to have teams of nurses, pharmacists, medical doctors, everybody kind of really truly working together as one team, and that means that training has got to occur that way. We can't run people through these kind of tracks where they don't interact very much. We've got to make sure their medical school experience, their pharmacy school experience, their nursing school experience forces people to get together in teams, work together, and teach people to respect each other as we do and work on patient care. So the other interesting thing is, what is the economic impact of this? And this will be the majority of what I'll talk about today. It's great to have a medical school, those kind of things. I think it's funny if you think about it. In Eastern Washington, we went from 0 medical schools to 2 medical schools, and we actually have more medical schools in Eastern Washington than they do in Seattle. The University of Washington and their collaboration with the Zags, we think is fabulous for this region and this area. Not just Washington, but certainly northern Idaho as well. And interestingly, one of the first meetings I had when I was named president of WSU was with Anamari Kalse, who's the president of the University of Washington. And both of our predecessors had gotten a little chippy, if you will, to try and get the medical school between the 2 large research institutions in the state of Washington. And we sat down, had a 2-hour dinner right in Montlake, and talked about the 2 universities got to bury the hatchet, and we got to work together. So what I want to see happen in this region is I want that University of Washington, Gonzaga Medical School partnership to be wildly successful. I want ours to be wildly successful, and not for us to be chipping at each other over resources and things like that, because the state of Washington, northern Idaho needs more highly trained physicians, and they need to come from this particular region. I think we're going to be able to do that. So 4 major areas of economic impact building a medical school. The first is our health tech incubator. I want to talk a little bit about that. Our practice plan, research that's coming, and job creation. So it's easy when we first start something like this to emphasize, hey, we got a certain number of medical students coming through, that's going to be great. But if you think about it, my older son, not the one that was in Gary's fraternity brother, but my older son, when he was born, had a little bit of a heart issue. And so we had to take him to the Mayo Clinic when he was 1 to have some surgery. And, at that time, it turns out it wasn't the kind of thing that was a life or death. It could have been later, but it was a fairly routine surgery if you want to talk about heart surgery on a 1-year-old being routine. But you go into somewhere like the Mayo Clinic, and you fly into this place in Minnesota, and it's a complex. Multiple hospitals, research, companies located there, all kinds of stuff. That's what our vision is not just 1 medical school or 2 medical schools, but companies located in this region, and not just in Spokane, here, locating in this because they want access to medical students, they want access to a medical community, they want to be part of a complex where people come for lots of different reasons. And so that's why this economic impact is so important. So one of the things that universities do in terms of research and these incubators is it's really a nexus point for companies, ideas, and things like that that get spun out of research to have a place to incubate. It also is a great place where somebody in the community says, I've got a great idea, or 3 of us have an excellent idea. We want to do a startup enterprise somewhere in the healthcare space. And guess what? We need some folks in the medical school to help us get to where we want to in the marketplace. So it's not just spinning stuff out from us. It's also when people are moving into an area, helping there to be a sense of, hey, there's people close by. And if you think about well-established medical schools, if any of you have traveled around the country and ever gone somewhere, you wind up seeing a lot of this around it. It's not just the medical students. So some of the benefits enables clinical partners to find solutions of their own. We're going to have people bring ideas forward and say, hey, I've worked at this hospital. 3 of us think we got something to do, but we're not sure about the commercialization. We don't know what to do with intellectual property. We're not sure if the university has resources to help us take from our idea from where it is to reality. We also think that there's certain types of companies that will be attracted to this region. In the short term, more software and service companies oriented towards the medical and health professions, Medium term, medical device companies that are here not just doing research, but doing manufacturing. And finally, long term, bio and life sciences companies. My experience around universities, and not with medical schools, but with vet schools and other things, is that these are impactful to a region. So even though we're located formally in Spokane, when companies are going to come here, guess what? They're going to look up and down this corridor from Coeur d'Alene over through Post Falls, look at Spokane Valley, Spokane. It's going to be all along here, and this is an economic opportunity for this region, not just for the city of Spokane and WSU. So how is it going to strengthen our reputation? Competitive advantage, having a medical school, it's going to help us attract new capital to the region. We think that's going to be really important. We want folks to look here, to locate here. New opportunities for employment for our citizens that currently live here and people and families that are here now. Increase our recognition as a hub for health, technology, innovation. We looked out there, and if you think about it, if you go between Seattle and Minneapolis, there's a lot of road there, and if there's a lot of the states in this particular region that need a healthcare hub, and I think this particular area is going to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now. It already is somewhat, but we're going to have people come from this huge region to this area because of the medical schools, the complexes that are here, the universities, the companies, and other spin-offs that we have moving forward. Potential impact to WSU. We're doing this because we want to see the area grow, but one of the things that happens is as you have these technologies that incubate and come off, you wind up having royalty income that comes back to the institution. That royalty income then gets invested in student scholarships. It gets invested in new enterprises and things like this, so it kind of feeds a system. One of the things that we're going to continue to emphasize, though, is a lot of these jobs would be sort of the gold-collar jobs that we talk about, high-paying type of jobs in our communities that are really important as we want to attract people and see this region grow. We also are doing a practice plan, and I did not work anywhere that had a medical school prior to coming here, so I'm learning a lot of this as we do it. But it turns out, I kind of thought when you start a medical school and you got faculty, you put them all in a room and those are your medical school faculty. Well, the way it actually works is it's not just those individuals, but we go out and probably have 100 or more faculty that are current individuals that work in hospitals and clinics and things in the region that do some teaching and working with students. They're just not full-time faculty at Washington State University. And so what's wound up happening is we have to build out this practice plan. It's not necessarily locating new people here, but you're going to find, it'll be interesting, you go to your doctor some point and you talk to them and you see somebody walk in and they've got a WSU coat on it. It turns out it'll be a medical student that is doing something at that particular place, and that individual then is part of our practice plan faculty. So I'll be watching for more of this in the future. The other thing that we want to do with our practice plan is telemedicine is still an evolving area. And it's amazing now if we pick up our smartphone, right, what we can do with that thing. As a matter of fact, my children, who are like 27 and 24, if you think and ask them about banking, their goal in life would be to never actually physically talk to a person about money, right? They want to be able to do it all on their phone. And when I send my youngest son his bi-monthly checks, for emergency money when he's got that hot date, hey, Dad, I need money. Anyway, how do we transfer it? I go, okay, and just do it on my phone and do that. Guess what? That generation also wants to do a lot of their medical stuff, routine stuff, on their phone. I don't think I want to do a FaceTime call with my physician and describe all the stuff that I'm doing. Guess what? They would have no hesitancy whatsoever about working in that particular environment. So when we talk about telemedicine, it's got lots of things to it, but we can envision a time when people can move x-rays and materials and information around just seamlessly, and we do so much of it at our desktop or on a handheld device. So we don't want to just be lagging in this area. We want WSU, with our emphasis on underserved areas, to be leading the way in what we're doing with telemedicine. So at the bottom line, we want increased access to health care, reduce health care costs, improve quality of life, fewer health disparities between populations. These are all things that we're looking at. Now this picture there, again, showing one of our medical students, one of our students from nursing, and they get to practice on these simulators. And one of the other things that we're working on is the simulator's the thing that looks like a person there. It turns out there's companies that make these. Any guess what those things cost? They're over $100,000 a year for those. And what's cool is you don't see this here, but they have a room off to the side that's got like glass, one-way glass through it. So faculty can be in there. We're recording the whole session. These things can talk. They can make them have seizures. They can do different things back in this control room and see how they're treated and how people interact. So what we're doing in our future is we're going to have a hospital set up where our pharmacy, nursing, medical students are all working in the same environment, and we can do these simulations to see how they react and things like this. It's all part of a modern medical education. And if you ever have a chance and you want to come over and see it, see me, talk to Gary, send us a note. We're happy to arrange a tour. There are some cool things today that we do with medical education that's just amazing. I was thinking about investing in this company because, man, $100,000 a pop, you know, that's not bad. So, so what are some potential financial impacts? The other thing that we're looking at is mobile units. And I originally, when they brought this idea forward, mobile units, I went back to elementary school when sort of the library would have like the bookmobile, right? And you walk in there and there's books. And so I kind of thought when they talked about this, that it would be essentially an RV type of deal, right? Where you go in and the doctor would kind of see you and go to rural areas. It's much, much more sophisticated than this. These units are $500,000 to $1 million. We have a grant that we got from a foundation to purchase one of these for our medical school. And what happens is you send it to one of these rural and underserved areas. It might be there for a week. And it's doing medical services back and forth for a week. So they go out into fields, into small little communities that don't have a physician, that have some of these serious health issues, and folks aren't going to get in a car and drive, so that we can go out and work in underserved urban and rural areas in a very creative way. We're going to have one of these mobile units at WSU in about a year to year and a half. And again, it's going to be one of those things I think people are going to want to see, because it's not just come to me with your issues, it's how can we take our medical professionals and put them out in communities where they're most needed. The other thing that that it's significant for us is research. Washington State University is a research university. We do about $350 million a year in terms of research, and that is our faculty out hustling grants and dollars that they're bringing in, solving all kinds of applied and complex problems, and that's across all of our campuses. The medical school allows us to get into certain areas, foundations, federal programs, National Institute of Health, places like that, that we really weren't real competitive for before because we didn't have human medicine as part of our portfolio as an institution. This last year, we already have $10 million in new grants just in the first couple years of the WSU Medical School. I have no doubt that if I was to come back here in a decade and give you the same presentation about medicine at WSU, that number will easily be in excess of $100 million to $150 million done just in this region, just at WSU Medicine. What are we going to be doing those things in, and what are some of the key areas? Well, we have some world-class individuals in sleep deprivation and sleep research. We're hiring some people that are going to elevate our opportunities for cancer treatments and research in this particular area. So are we going to duplicate the same things that they might have at Harborview, Children's Mercy in Seattle, things like that? No. There are certain things that are very expensive, certain research areas that we don't need to duplicate. But there are others where we can be world-class and bring some people to this community that people might have to go to Seattle or Minneapolis to see, and all of a sudden folks are going to be hop in the car and drive 30 minutes and be there. So I think you're going to continue to see substantial things here. Finally, some of the things that we'll be doing, hiring additional faculty. Of core services and facilities. Here's the research, sleep and performance, neuroscience, addiction and pain, autism, cancer, and antimicrobial resistance are things that we are going to be kind of focus areas for us in the next year or two. We're also working on commercialization spin-off companies, and we already have some invention disclosures and things happening. We're excited as we bring in folks that are doing this. The final thing I'll talk about is job creation. And this is always something that higher ed gets a little squishy on, what job creation looks like. I can tell you, if you don't have a college of medicine, you have 0, and then all of a sudden you have a college of medicine and you've hired 200 people, that's job creation. So we have got 259 faculty and staff, part and full-time, today. This is not in the future. This is if you do a head count today. Paid and volunteer positions, over 400, and appointed 151 non-salaried clinical faculty members. So one of the reasons out there, if you're ever curious, and I know the state of Idaho has toyed around over the last several years with starting a medical school, I've been amazed at how expensive it is and how complex it is to start a medical school from scratch. Where you have a building, you've got some empty space, and you want to get started with 0. It's very complex and requires a lot of individuals. So we think this is directly coming to this economy here in this region because these folks are living here, they are shopping here, they are just out and about in our communities, and I think we're going to continue to add aggressively over the next couple years. So with that, it's an exciting time at Washington State University. The medical school is just one of a variety of things that we're doing. I mentioned my conversations with Anna Mari about the two universities working together. This last week, I had breakfast with Chuck and Mary Beth Staben, who are president and first lady at the University of Idaho. One of my jobs and one of the things I think I need to do as a president is we need higher education in our region working together, and that goes across state lines. So we talk about partnerships we can do with U of I. I've been in conversations with Thane about things that we can do at Gonzaga. All of us want to work together to make sure that this region is a great region to live in, to work in, and to play in, and I think working together is the way we get that done. So thank you for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to coming back in several years and talking about all the great things that are happening, and as always, go Cougs. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Schulz so much for being here. He's a really busy guy. In fact, I think he's jumping on a plane or a car to head to the Tri-Cities for the next conversation and event. It's really exciting to see what WSU is doing as it relates to not only WSU and Spokane, but how that will impact northern Idaho. And so I'd like to say first of all, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for everything you do every day for Washington State University. Thanks. All right then, we begin with the next part of our program. I am pleased today to introduce Sam Wolkenhauer, who is with the Department of Labor from the state of Idaho. I've seen his presentations before. You're going to find he's not your garden variety labor guy from Boise, right? I think you're going to agree once he does his program. So, welcome.
Well, my parents are Wazoo alumni, and I've always known that my dad would sacrifice his firstborn, which is me, for Butch. And now we add Mike Leach to that list. So there's kind of like a Mike Leach cult going on at my dad's house. So it's very exciting to follow him up. So I'm an economist with the Idaho Department of Labor. And just by show of hands, how many of you have heard this issue with the Tide Pods, with kids eating Tide Pods? because they look like candy. So normally, if you listen to a labor economist for 20 minutes, you'll go, now I understand why someone would want to eat a Tide Pod. So what I like to do is, instead of just sort of regurgitating a bunch of statistics for you, is I like to really focus on like pictures and shapes and colors and things like that. So hopefully we won't get too boring here. We'll keep it lively. So basically my goal is to give you like the brief overview of what people should know about the state of the U.S. economy right now. So first off, Janet Yellen is my personal hero. She was the former chairwoman of the Federal Reserve, and if you've looked at financial markets, she's been out of the job for less than a week now, and we're all missing her very dearly. This is very timely, since this is raising all these recession fears. So we're just going to be kind of talking about the state of the labor market, the state of the U.S. economy at large, and you don't have to remember any of the numbers from this presentation. We're just going to kind of look at the shapes and the colors, and it'll all be very fun. So this is America's labor market. This is like the simplest way that we can come up with to represent the whole economy. This blue line represents how many jobs are created in a given year, essentially, the year-over-year change in jobs, and that axis is scaled to the millions. So the U.S. economy has been creating about 2 million jobs year over year since late 2011, which is a very, very strong rate of job creation, and that's been starting to decelerate. Now, what's really interesting is, I read a study recently where they showed people essentially a graph like this, and they asked them to identify when the White House changed hands, essentially, because people always think that who is president ends up having, you know, a lot of influence over the labor market. So we kind of take away the numbers down there so we can't see the dates, and people tend to look for places where there's like a kink in the line or it changes directions. So, you know, we put W up there. Love W. And then we have that recession down there, so people put Obama down there at the bottom. And then you can see that the rate of job creation has started to decelerate in the last year or two. And so people put our current president right there where the line starts to turn down, because people think that the president or the political party in power should have something to do with what's going on with the slope of the line here. This isn't what it looks like at all. W actually came in office at the bottom of this downswing. Obama was right in the middle there, and this deceleration was beginning for over a year before Donald Trump took office. The labor market, the economy as a whole, is extremely organic. And I like to use the word organic, especially when I speak to high school kids, because that's how you get young people interested in things. You tell them the economy's organic, and then they're like, all right. Because young people love organic avocados, right? That's the whole joke. But the labor market is extremely organic. It's a very large, potent organism that has its own ebbs and flows, really indifferent to who is in office. So while it is true that job creation over the last calendar year was the weakest in the last 7 years, the year before that was the previous weakest. It's a deceleration that is far more related to the natural ebbs and flows of the economy than it is to who is in office. So let's look at some measures of this. So the central message that you're going to hear from your state departments of labor, from the national economic research agencies, is that we really can't expect the economy to continue to grow at a high rate long into the future. And the main reason for that is that America has mostly used up its supply of excess labor. We've mostly used up all our skilled labor that was unemployed in 2010, 2011. So here's the number of unemployed people in the United States. That's in millions. And so you can see that, you know, in early 2011, there were about 15 million people who were out of work looking for work. And we're down to about 6 million people that are unemployed, which is a pretty typical number when you consider the the routine friction that exists in our labor market, the routine turnover that you would see even when the economy is very healthy. We've also seen a lot of people who were working part-time that have gone back to working full-time. So here's the number of what we call economic part-time workers. So these are people that are working part-time but would prefer to have a full-time job if they could find one. And so you can see that that number has decreased pretty much back to where it was in late 2007, just before the recession began. And speaking to people interested in real estate, I always try to remember that that the recession was probably particularly traumatic for you. Now, I studied economics and math in college, so it was more of an academic curiosity to me, and so I will try to treat it with the correct gravitas for the situation here. So we've been creating roughly 2 million jobs per year over the last 6 years, which is a very, very strong number, but we really can't expect that to continue just given the low availability of skilled labor. Idaho's unemployment rate has been at or within a couple decimal points of the all-time record low for almost a year now. And so it is very clear, especially in Idaho, North Idaho and the Boise region especially, that the main constraint on economic growth right now is the shortage of labor. It's not taxatory policy or regulatory policy, which are important, but those have definitely taken a backseat to the availability of labor. Now, the other thing that's great is that most of the jobs, as I've showed you, that have been created in the United States have been full-time work. So this is the year-over-year change in employment. Red is full-time, blue is part-time. So since the start of 2007, full-time work in the United States is up 9.8 million. So 9.8 million new full-time jobs on top of all those losses that we experienced during the recession. And part-time work is actually down slightly. So even though there was concern about all the part-time work being created in 2009, 2010, those jobs have given way to full-time work, which is obviously what we like to see because that's what people want. So labor market, very healthy, very steady, solid rate of job creation, and most of those jobs have been full-time. So firing on all cylinders, but we do expect it to slow down just as labor supply becomes more and more of an issue. Now, another issue that we've seen that has raised this sort of new problem is the slow rate of wage growth. So this is the percentage rate of change of what we call non-supervisory wages. And so first off, if you're wondering why wages were growing so quickly late 60s, early 70s, that's the Nixon bump. People who have heard me talk before know I'm a big Nixon guy. I believe he's the greatest American that ever lived, and that is why wages were growing at 8%, just because of Nixon. But Nixon's gone now, tragically. I was blessed to share the earth with him for about 3 years, best years of my life, for reasons entirely connected with Richard Nixon. So anyway, wages have been growing much slower in recent years. So if we're looking at this, I don't know if you can see my laser, but there's this ebb and flow here, right? Because wages don't really rise when unemployment is high. So when there's recessions, when we have these troughs, wage growth flattens. Here's the recession, and what's troublesome is that there's no spike. Traditionally, what you see is a spike in the rate of wage growth as unemployment gets very low. You get down to like 3% unemployment, 3.5. That puts a lot of upward pressure on wages. And given how low unemployment is right now, we expect to see upward pressure on wages that really has not materialized for the majority of American workers. And so this leads to this unfortunate scenario where the majority of American households have not seen their disposable income rise in the last decade or so. So what I'm showing you here is, it's a little complicated at first, but it's actually super easy to read. Every bar there is 1 percentile of American households arranged by their total household income. And so as you go from left to right, these are higher and higher earnings. And the height of the bar simply represents what has happened to that percentile's income adjusted for inflation since 2007. And so the easiest way to read this is that 85% of American households have lower inflation-adjusted income than they did in 2007. That's essentially how we read this. And this is obviously directly tied to the low rate of wage growth. So the issue that we're facing is questions, first off, of how durable our expansion is. Our current expansion has been driven largely by business investment. Business investment has made up an oversized share of our growth in the current expansion period. And a large reason for that is that household income just really isn't rising very quickly, which raises questions, can households drive this expansion with their spending? Well, that's very difficult when their disposable income isn't rising. So how long can households perpetuate the current growth period? And the second question, which is obviously more directly related to your industry, is household wealth formation has stalled for a lot of households in America, the majority of households in America. And so this, of course, raises questions about the proclivity of millennials to buy homes, especially when they have significant overhang from their student debt. And then this ties into demographics as well. Millennials delaying the decision to start families for reasons related to wealth formation. I sound household formation and wealth accumulation. Okay, so people are always want to ask me questions about millennials because I am one. And the thing is, I studied math in college, so I am hardly hip to how most millennials. How most, I've never been inebriated in my whole life because you can't afford that when you're studying math. I don't have time for that. And so I don't get I don't understand IPAs and all this stuff. So I talk about, wealth accumulation and household formation of millennials. I've met these people, I tutored a lot of them, and I don't. Well, no, so I'm just saying, people always say, when are millennials going to buy homes and start families? And I'm like, you want these people to raise children? I don't. No child deserves that. So this is obviously an issue in terms of how long the current expansion can perpetuate itself on the basis of household spending. There we really veered hard back on track. So the other thing that we have to be aware of is that the economy's growing, but wages aren't growing. So where has the growth gone? Well, the answer overwhelmingly is corporate profits. So this is not Bolshevik agitation, but corporate profits are essentially at an all-time high as a share of our GDP. So for a very long time, corporate profits hovered between 1% and 3% of our total GDP. And beginning in basically the year 2000, you saw this very sharp increase. So now corporate profits take up about 10% of our total GDP. And that share, I hate the economy as a pie metaphor, but it's kind of how we have to go right here. That share of the pie that has gone to corporate profits has mostly come from labor. About 40 years ago, 65 to 70% of GDP was wages, was taken home by households and wages, and that's shrunk to closer to 56, 57%. So there's been this very clear structural shift where more and more of our GDP has gone to corporate profits and, to a smaller extent, business investment than it has to household wealth formation. Someone once referred to this as the Sanders graph, like the Bernie Sanders graph. And so this is not intended to, give credence to any candidate from 2016. Although I do think Jeb Bush was unfairly made fun of for putting the exclamation mark on his logo. You know, he was Jeb, and everyone roasted him for that, and I didn't get it. I thought it was nice. So people call this the Sanders graph, and while this doesn't necessarily explain why corporate profits have increased, I think that people intuitively can sense this sort of underlying economic reality, that household wealth is not increasing. And I think that this phenomenon drove a lot of the support for what I would consider anti-establishment candidates on both sides, right? This sense that the structure of the economy has shifted, and it has not shifted to the benefit of ordinary American households. And so whether you want to talk about Bernie Sanders and his aggressive taxation plans, or whether you want to talk about anti-trade rhetoric from our current president, I think that both of those political phenomena were driven by this same sort of underlying economic reality, that the structure of the economy has shifted away from most American households, if that makes sense. Because, I mean, intuitively, economics is political, and we have to try to make it non-political. That's why I often wish I'd studied geology, right? Because if I come up here and I give you a speech about igneous rocks, no one's going to go, I don't believe in igneous rocks. But if you study economics, everyone cares about that, and everyone has an opinion. So if I could just come up here and talk about botany or geology or something, it'd be a lot less controversial and boring. So let's move on. So the other thing that I think is really important to talk about is this decrease in labor force participation. So these two lines show you the percentage of people who are working or looking for work. That's labor force participation. And the red line is this all adults, and then the blue line is 25 to 54-year-olds. And the reason I show you this is because it's very important to understand that as millions of Americans have slowly but surely dropped out of the labor force, and labor force participation has decreased, that decline has been driven by the demographic that traditionally is the core of the American working population. 25 to 54-year-old men, specifically. Female labor force participation has increased in the last 20 years, as has labor force participation among men older than 54. So people are working longer into their lives, more and more women are working, and so the decrease in our labor force participation and this disappearance of many American workers has been driven entirely by the people that historically are most likely to be working. And there are a variety of reasons for this. People always ask me if it's because video games are more realistic now. I don't really play Xbox much, so I don't know what these people are doing during the day. We do know, however, that men have stopped working in large numbers, and this is undoubtedly tied to issues like the decline of manufacturing in America, which has taken away a lot of jobs that were traditionally filled by men. This has a lot to do with the opioid crisis, because it's no coincidence that the same demographic that's dropped out of the labor force is also the same demographic most likely to have issues with prescription or non-prescription opioids. And this also has something to do with the high rate of female participation in the labor force. Surveys show that the majority of men who are not working, when they're asked what their primary source of household income is, they usually cite the income of their spouse or partner. And so this has driven a real hollowing out of the core American working demographic. And so this has to temper our expectations about how fast the economy can grow long term. So this line is probably the most important one that I'll show you. This is the growth of the core working population, the 24 to 54-year-old population in the United States. And so you can see when the baby boomers and the Gen Xers are really gelling there, and it's growing at an excess of 2% annually. And then the baby boomers start to reach their retirement years, and this drops off and essentially becomes zero. And it may even shrink. We may have a shrinking working population in the future, depending on what happens with millennials and family formation, to go back to our favorite word. So the Nixon bump evaporates in the late 1980s, and look at our rate of GDP growth in these decades. 3.2% in the 70s, 3.1% in the 80s, another 3.2, and then 1.8. Because you really can't expect that kind of dynamic growth when your working age population isn't growing. And so whatever happens with taxatory and regulatory policy and infrastructure, this represents sort of the hard, immutable economic destiny of the United States, is finding ways around a labor force that is not going to grow long term. Now in North Idaho in particular, we have issues with this. Something happened with my labels. So that first label is supposed to say under 15-year-olds. So what I'm showing you here is the growth of the populations by their age. So the blue is meant to be Kootenai County, and then the red is the whole state of Idaho. So the essential takeaway from here is that the growth of 65 and older populations is absolutely dwarfing the growth of the working age population and the youth population. And in a lot of the rural counties around here, actually in any of the rural counties, Bonner, Boundary, Shoshone, etc., the youth population is shrinking. And presumably these children are not wandering off on their own, so, well, we hope so. So that represents families leaving rural areas. And this represents a significant challenge, really nationally, with the retirement age population just ballooning relative to the working population. That's why millennials know we're not getting Social Security. That's like the one thing we know. We may not know much else, but we know, well, do we know that? Because millennials don't save either. So they know they're not going to get Social Security, but they're not saving for retirement. Maybe they're going to eat Tide Pods when the time comes to retire or something like that. So, so this last little graph that I wanted to show you is really sort of my optimism graph, and it doesn't really look that optimistic at first. So what I'm showing you is the change in American manufacturing since 1970. Now the red line is employment in manufacturing, which is down about 30% since 1970. U.S. factories nationwide have shed 8 to 9 million workers in the last 30 years. But look at the blue line. The blue line is our factory output. So this is the productivity of American factories nationwide, and it has absolutely skyrocketed. And my favorite example, some of you have heard me use this example before, it's the Tesla factory in Southern California. So in 1970, the nationwide productivity of our auto sector was between 7 and 9 cars per worker per year. The Tesla factory in Southern California can make, they believe, 85 cars per worker per year. And I love that just as a concrete example of what has happened to manufacturing in this country, what's happened to industry in general. So we do face economic challenges in the form of our demographics, in the form of shrinking labor pool, in the form of kids that think eating laundry detergent is fun. I mean, we're joking, but we're not. These all represent challenges facing the U.S. economy going forward. But at the same time, I think that there's never been a more exciting time for the American economy, given what's happened to our innovation and our productivity. One great high point during the recession, again, I know it was bad for a lot of you, we retook the crown as the most productive manufacturing economy in the world. We lapped up the Germans and the Japanese who had been ahead of us for about a decade. So we're once again we have the most productive factory fleet nationwide of any country in the world. And so there have been a lot of great investments, a lot of great innovations. Before the recession, there was no iPhone. A lot of people don't realize that was something introduced while the economy was shedding jobs, while the economy was restructuring and struggling. And so despite these demographic challenges, despite the questions of what millennials are going to do, what their work habits are going to be like, and even worse, what the Gen Z people are going to be like, you know, the people coming after us. You thought we were bad. So actually, it's the Gen Zers that are doing the Tide Pod thing. Millennials, that's not really our thing, but anyone like under 30 seems to get lumped together as a millennial, and so I really want to take a stand and say that a lot of the things you hear that are bad about us are really Gen Z people, and so hopefully we can scapegoat them for everything. But there are so many exciting things going on here in North Idaho. There's so many exciting things going on nationally. America's once again becoming a powerhouse of innovation and leading the world in productivity. And I think that this little picture just really demonstrates how that is, that American factories have nearly tripled their output since 1970. They're doing it with 30% fewer human beings. And so the challenge becomes, how do we retrain people and reintegrate them into the new 21st century economy? But it's a very exciting time for America and for North Idaho, and so the question becomes, how long can we sustain this on the back of our dynamic innovation? I guess that's my last slide. This isn't my slide. How did I do on time? I don't know who's next. Good, okay. I don't know who's next.
So on behalf of everyone at Coldwell Banker Commercial, we want to present Sam with this sailboat. But before I do that, not only was your information very, very informing nationally, but also on the state level, and you made everyone in the crowd laugh and smile, and that's what life's all about. So once again, thank you for taking time to be here.
Perfect. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to dive into the local market, and we're going to start off with our first topic. And before I introduce the speaker, I apologize. I stepped out and someone asked me, "Who are you?" You didn't introduce yourself. For those of you that I don't know in this room, my name is Mark Johnson. I'm the president and CEO of Coldwell Banker, and I've been with Gary just under 30 years. So once again, this is a great event, and we're excited to introduce Rob Brickett, who will be talking about the residential market update. Welcome, Rob.
Idaho is the fastest growing state in the Union. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you. Stretch it out a little bit. Apparently, I have a little more time. According to U.S. Census Bureau's estimates of national and state populations, the GEM state has the most rapid growth. Derek Santos, economist for Idaho's Division of Financial Management, said nearly 2/3 of the 2017 population growth was due to domestic net migration. This showing reflects the draw of Idaho's strong economy and low cost of living. A little bit about me. I'm the little guy right in the middle there. I was born like last week. That's me as a preemie. I was a really, really small baby, as you can tell. I started out life in the city of Baltimore, also called Charm City. Charm City was actually a marketing ploy created in 1975 because the city's reputation was so bad that the mayor was desperate to try and change the city's image. Well, the name stuck, and the city did change its image. It's a great example of the power of great marketing. Coldwell Banker. When you control the market, you control the conversation. But I digress. While traveling in this great country of ours, I stumbled upon the most amazing place and decided to make my home right here. The discovery of our area is a story that's becoming more and more common. 20 years later to today, and I still love this place we call home. My kids are working their way through their teenage years, and mom and dad are starting to think about the next step in housing. And that brings us to an interesting trend in the real estate market. As people's lives change, such as their kids growing up and moving out, they're naturally starting to look for a place to live that reflects their new lifestyle. However, what we're seeing is that these people want to ensure that they can identify and secure that new home before they sell their existing home. And I want to focus on that, before they sell their existing home. If they don't find that new home or don't feel comfortable that it'll be available when they sell, many are deciding to just stay in their current home. As we're going to see, new construction is the key to correcting our high demand and low supply imbalance. We're going to run through the causes and effects involved in the imbalance, the effects of those causes, and finally, the results of the causes and effects. So let's look at the factors that are causing the shortage of homes or chairs in our marketplace. The economy is doing incredibly well, with the GDP growth rate hovering over 3% for multiple quarters now, for the first time in 3 years. Unemployment is at historic lows, not only nationally, but most dramatically right here in Kootenai County. The national unemployment rate is 4.1%, and Kootenai County beat that impressive number at 3.8%. And the national unemployment rate is suggested by some pretty smart folks in the financial sector to continue falling to as low as 3.2% by the end of the year. The most growth in our job market occurred, starting with the largest sectors, in construction, transportation, financials, education and health, and leisure and hospitality. Ultimately, skilled labor is simply not growing fast enough to meet the need. Well said, Sam. Kootenai County's predicted population is 178,000 people by 2025. Today, the population is 150,000 people, 346, an increase of over 27,000 people. As you can see, the 65-plus age group will see the largest percentage of increase in population. The draw of our area is a combination of economic, low taxes and cost of living advantages, health and infrastructure, as well as local amenities such as natural beauty and recreational opportunities. Much of this growth is coming from in-migration, people moving here from outside the area. While California accounts for a very large part of our migration, Washington is the largest contributor. For the second time in a decade, Seattle was ranked the fastest growing big city in the country. That growth is resulting in the fastest home price increases in the nation for the 10th straight month. The rate of price escalation in Seattle is 13.4%. The national average is 5.8%. The result of this growth is limited supply and unaffordability. We are definitely an attractive alternative. But there's another place in Washington that migration is occurring, and that is Spokane County. Spokane County has an urban growth area which limits land availability and pushes some demand east to North Idaho. As we know, eastern Washington and North Idaho have a very soft border, and home pricing and availability in North Idaho will result in a strong population draw from eastern Washington. Another interesting perspective is the different relationship of California and Washington in migration between Kootenai County and the two booming counties to the south. This is a great visual demonstrating the importance of Washington on our population growth. Let's be clear, interest rates are amazing. Interest rates continue to stay at historic lows, and it's hard not to feel pretty good when you compare today's rate with almost 17% in 1981. It is still a good time to buy. So we know people are migrating here to our area to buy homes. We know that the conditions are right for everyone, including our own local population, to buy a home. We also know that there's a major shortage of homes available, and part of that cause is limited supply. It's people not selling their homes. We can see here people are holding on to their homes much longer than in the past. As we discussed earlier, people are not listing their home for sale till they find a home to buy. If they don't find a home to buy, they are just keeping their home. This is a tremendous source for the low levels of homes for sale. Home prices are increasing exponentially. Median sold prices have increased year over year for both resale and new construction since 2011. And new construction median sold prices have averaged 14% higher than resale over the last 10 years. Affordability is down and trends show it worsening. This is where new construction could really help the situation. If existing homes came on the market and new construction could create the homes that those existing homeowners desire, we would see home affordability improve. As we've seen, there are just not enough homes for sale to meet demand. Active listings are not keeping pace with sales. Nationally, we continue to be stuck at about 4 months of inventory. Economists regard a healthy, balanced market at 6 months of inventory. Locally, we're even lower than the national number at 3 3/4 months of inventory. The number of new construction permits in Kootenai County this past year it's really fascinating. What I believe we're seeing here is a surge of demand for new construction leading up to 2016, and then the reality that only so many homes can be constructed. So there continues to be demand, but new construction has hit a glass ceiling, so to speak. The reason that new construction has hit the glass ceiling is the lack of qualified subcontractors to build these homes. We have incredible building companies in our area that want to meet that demand, but there is simply not enough skilled labor to make that happen. Finally, let's look at the actual results of these causes and effects. Polls show that those who desire to own a home is over 80% of the population. However, actual home ownership is hovering at a 50-year low, below 64%. So you have people who want to own a home, but home ownership is stuck at historically low levels. And home prices are going up much faster than what people earn. Thankfully, the interest rate is low, but the disparity between income and home prices creates a huge hurdle for people becoming homeowners. Another major factor polls have shown is student debt. Saving up for a down payment is a huge issue, as well as affording the monthly payments and qualifying for a mortgage. Again, new construction could play a huge role in creating new homes that provide more affordability and creating homes for existing homeowners to move to and free up their homes for purchase. In many cases, the homes that are being freed up to purchase provide that affordability to people most affected by this growing gap. In conclusion, this feels like a bubble due to the high demand and price escalations, but this is no bubble. We do not have an oversupply situation. We have an undersupply situation. That means no bubble. Projections are strong that this year will continue to grow in terms of new and existing home sales, but also that interest rates will start to rise with the healthy economy. For the issue of price escalation, home construction is what will temper that inflation. We also have a tremendous amount of land to develop. The shaded areas are the larger cities within our area: Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, Hayden, Rathdrum. There are still vast areas of undeveloped land. Another bright spot in our local marketplace are infill projects, where land is being utilized to its fullest extent and further filling the housing need. We're seeing smaller acreage open land being developed into housing and commercial uses. We're also seeing a surge in construction training and apprenticeship programs. This is honestly my favorite part. Head Start to Construction in Spokane, part of the Associated General Contractors of America, is focused on training women who currently make up only 9% of the construction workforce. K-Tech and North Idaho College are also doing tremendous work in providing qualified trades to fill the construction jobs that we so desperately need. And construction businesses in our area are offering incredible opportunities for people to learn a trade while earning a living. Apprenticeship not only empowers people to obtain a career, but also will contribute to solving the issue of the shortage of skilled contractors. So, in conclusion, homeownership continues to be the American dream. People from outside the area are still moving here looking for homes. With these new people coming into the musical chairs game, they are looking for chairs, and there just aren't many. New construction is the key to solving this shortage of chairs, solving the imbalance of high demand and low supply. We desperately need new construction to create more chairs, more homes to fill the needs so that our neighbors and friends can get up and find a new chair, creating opportunities for both the new folks entering this area and those just starting out. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next topic, we're going to move into multifamily, and our presenter is Mr. Ben Windmeyer. Welcome, Ben.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming. So in addition to working at Coldwell Banker, I own a management company, so I'm in this market daily and are seeing the changes taking place. So here's an outline for the presentation this morning. We will spend a little more time going over national trends, as the local market, while active, did not have many major sales and new projects announced. The national market has always been a good indicator of future trends for us locally, and there are some major shifts happening at that level. Following 12 years of negative growth, the U.S. homeownership rate appears to have hit its bottom and even increased in 2017, up to 64%. The robust historical rental demand we have seen in the past 5 years directly relates to the shortage of for-sale housing, and we have had forcing households who can afford to buy into the rental pool. For reference purposes, a 1% increase in the home ownership rate decreases the absorption of around 800,000 rental units nationwide. And even though millennials are starting to buy homes, and there's talk of the home ownership rate increasing, it's hard to see the rate in the medium to long term escaping the band it's been in the last couple of years. As the baby boomers and Gen Xers start to retire and leave home ownership and enter the rental pool, they will offset that younger generation leaving. Another major factor driving demand for rentals is the lack of affordable starter homes throughout the United States. Vacancies nationwide ticked marginally higher in the last quarter of 2017, which is consistent with seasonal patterns we have seen in the last couple years, so nothing too surprising. What is surprising is how low the supply number was that was delivered at the end of the year. This is due to a large number of properties delaying their finish and being delivered in the first quarter of 2018. Given the expectation of a moderate rise in home ownership rate and continued levels of supply, it's forecasted the vacancy rate will rise to just below 7% over the next 4 to 5 years, from the current level of around 6.5%. These are not catastrophic outcomes and are more in line with historic norms. Year-over-year rent growth held steady around 2.2%, which is in line with the recent path and historical levels, but well below the 5% we saw in 2015. Forecast calls for deceleration of rental growth as vacancy rates rise. It seems this cycle for the apartment market peaked nationally in 2015, but the sector still benefits from a continued undersupply of housing at large in the U.S. The apartment market is defensive in nature, buoyed by the necessity to live and rent in times of a downturn, and defensive in rising interest rate environment, as people on the margin may not buy homes. The top 20 rent growth markets in 2017 is a surprising chart, as it's led by markets like Las Vegas and Phoenix that were later recovering markets. These markets were hit hard by the housing bust and have suffered from very low supply since. Sales volume nationwide continued and was only 3% off its 2015 high. It continues to remain high, driven by a couple factors. Apartments continue to be the favored asset class among investors, and second, what I mentioned earlier, is that its nature is defensive in both times of downturn and economic growth. Even though there appears to be some weakness on the macro level nationwide, it hasn't led to any significant price loss. This is driven by core markets and trophy assets continuing to be in high demand, but as we will bring up later, these areas with low cap rates are facing pressure from rising interest rates. 2017 was an environment of rising interest rates, but the 10-year Treasury hadn't been affected until after the tax law changes were proposed and later passed into law, in which case we finally started to see some upward movement. What this means is we should start to see upward pressure on cap rates. That pressure should hit the core markets first, where they have seen historically low cap rates, with reported deals in the 3 to 4% range. The following slides here are figures gathered by the Runstead Center for Real Estate Studies at the University of Washington and are based on complexes built after 1963 containing at least 10 apartments, and this survey does not include any rent-subsidized units. As you can see, rental rates in Kootenai County continue to rise. This is a factor of current rents rising, as well as new projects coming online, which are commanding the highest rental rates. Broken down by unit type, studios commanded the highest rental rate of $1.33 per square foot, with one bedrooms lower at $1.06, or an average of $745 per month. Two-bedroom units were split into 1 and 2 bath units. The two-bedroom, 2-bath units were slightly higher at 94 cents a square foot versus 83 cents a square foot for two-bedroom, 1-bath units. The two-bedroom, 1-bath units represent a lot of the older stock built before 1986, which is the reason for the large difference in price per square foot. The 3-bedroom, 2-bath units averaged $1,160 per month, or $1.02 per square foot. The higher price per square foot here represents the very low supply of these types of rental units. We have at our historically low vacancy rates, and it continued in 2017. However, we saw our first significant increase in over 3 years. Still well below historical norms, as you'll see on the building permit slides later, we still are not supplying enough rental units in the market rate rental pool. So much of our supply has been affordable housing, which is much needed in our area, but it has stalled the supply of market rate units, which are represented in this survey. 2 market rate deals are starting construction in 2018 and will add roughly 80 units to the supply of market rate rentals. These 2 projects are located close to downtown and will command rental rates in the $1.35 per square foot and up. Construction of a small project is wrapping up in Midtown that will contain 8 one-bedroom units, and there are some more affordable apartments being built near Winco in Coeur d'Alene. We should see most of our new construction growth in the communities outside of Coeur d'Alene. In June, an 86-unit property in Post Falls sold for a little over $6.7 million, or at $78,000 per unit. This building was 92% occupied at the time of the sale, with a net income of around $400,000, yielding a cap rate of just over 6%. English Village, an affordable property covered by a Section 8 HAP contract, sold in 2017 from a nonprofit housing developer in Boise to a company out of Seattle. The company out of Boise acquired the property in 2013 for under $30,000 a unit, and while the sale price was undisclosed, it's anticipated the most recent sale was over $50,000 a unit. English Village contains 66 units and are a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. Coeur d'Alene Manor is a 60-unit complex and was sold in conjunction with the previous property. the new Seattle-based owner intends to use tax credits to rehab and improve both complexes. The buyer is an experienced affordable housing owner and developer. As you can see, building permits, we peaked in 2013 and were very busy in 2014 and 15. These numbers were largely driven by affordable apartments. In the last couple of years, we have seen a significant drop. I anticipate as we have market rate deals in the pipeline that our permit numbers should increase as our market trends closer to what's happened on the national stage in 2015. Permit value tracks the total permits chart in 2013 being the high in Coeur d'Alene, and our last 2 years being 2 of the 3 lowest in the last 10. We have a couple projects planned, and that should increase these numbers, but what one can take from this chart is construction is starting to spread out to other communities outside of Coeur d'Alene. And as land costs have increased, it's becoming more difficult to find land to build apartments within the city. Vacancy rates should continue to rise as we slowly add market rate units to the supply pipeline. Our market tends to lag national trends, and after a couple of years of moderate rent growth, we saw our largest increase in 2017, which compares to 2015 on the national level. We should level off and start to see rent growth going forward in the 2 to 3% range. The apartment market is stable, and we've done a good job locally of not overbuilding. New construction is being absorbed very quickly, and we still have record low vacancy. As has been published recently, Idaho is the fastest growing state in the country, with North Idaho leading that growth, and that will continue to push rental demand. As evidenced by the 3 largest sales in the county, investors from large metro areas continue to have an eye on our market, and this trend will continue going forward. We have cap rates in the low 6%, and that's about as low as we should go as we are entering an environment of rising interest rates and starting to see the 10-year Treasury track up. With a couple larger projects planned, we should see an increase in the number of permits as well as permit value. Construction will be active in other communities, especially Post Falls and Rathdrum, as they continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Our next topic is office and retail, and our presenter is Mr. Doug Rawl.
Thanks for the introduction, Mark, and to our sponsors and guests for attending this 11th annual event. Real estate is cyclical, depending on the strength of the economy. And during the bottom of the current market, 2009-2010, real estate was much gloomier and more difficult to sell or to lease. Today, I will speak about our Kootenai County office market, followed by the retail market. We will look at vacancy and rental rates, sales examples for 2017, and some of the new construction. Our survey of 401 buildings totaling 4 million square feet of office shows that the office vacancy declined to 4.78% countywide. Post Falls had the greatest decrease in vacancy, down from over 14% the prior year to 6% the current year, with a few of the larger vacancies now leased. Our survey shows that rental rates for office have remained stable for several years. This chart shows a blended rate of full service, modified gross, and triple net rents, and the rates have not been adjusted to one specific lease type. The survey method is consistent from year to year, and these rates are a good economic indicator. Post Falls is currently showing the highest blended rate of over $18 per square foot for office, followed by Coeur d'Alene at $17. This first example was built in 1980 in a good location and sold for $74 per square foot. You can see where most of the information is shown in the table for each example that we will go through, and for the sake of expediency, will not be reiterated. This office was built in 1942 and has been updated. A large 0.44 acre lot and a few storage sheds in the back contributed to the value of this midtown location. Built in a good location in 1953, this office was nicely remodeled prior to the sale. This classic downtown office building was originally constructed in 1910 and retained much of its original charm and several private parking spaces. While the basement area, over 3,700 square feet, has some value, it is not included in the square foot calculations due to the lack of utility. This building is located directly on Ironwood Drive. Half the property was below grade, lower level, and it was finished, and it did provide some value because it was leasable. A newer office condo duplex built in 2005. The back side of the building has interstate exposure. The suite has a main floor of 2,210 square feet and a finished basement of 1,344 square feet with a private office and second bathroom in that basement that added additional value. On the northwest corner of Honeysuckle and Highway 95 near Walmart, this Hayden office was built in 2000 at a great location. Moving over to Post Falls, this 1979 office building has a main level of 6,538 square feet and an upstairs area of 2,531 square feet. The basement area was not included in the value calculation. Now for a few new construction examples in Riverstone. The upper picture is a new eye clinic under construction near the Pinkerton building. The lower picture is a new Staybridge Suites Hotel under construction next to McDonald's near the entrance to Riverstone. A new Idaho Central Credit Union office building is under construction on West Appleway near Sweeto Burrito and Winco Foods. Downtown Coeur d'Alene is getting a new 370-stall parking garage, currently under construction between North 3rd and 4th Streets on Coeur d'Alene Avenue. This new medical office building is on the southwest corner of Prairie and Mystic Avenue near the Caddy Shack. In summary, for office then, before we move on to retail, new office construction will likely continue to be owner-user driven, primarily medical. Rental rates will remain steady, with small increases expected at lease renewals. Smaller spaces at good rates are harder to find, and tenants are encouraged to negotiate longer-term renewals as rates continue to edge up and vacancy declines. Now on to the retail portion of our program. For retail, the overview will be similar to that which we saw for office. In addition, we'll include some local store closure examples that reflect national trends. Our 2017 survey of 670 retail buildings totaling 7.8 million square feet resulted in an overall vacancy for Kootenai County of 5.7%, the healthy rate. The north buildings of the former Factory Outlet Mall continue to distort the picture for Post Falls that shows an overall vacancy of 9.34%, and without these would be less than 6%. Coeur d'Alene showed the lowest vacancy of 4.53%, followed by Hayden at 4.75%. The average retail rental rates shown are blended rates. They're a good economic indicator, but are not adjusted between full service, gross, and triple net leases all of which were included in the survey. Hayden had the highest rental rate for retail, averaging over $13 per square foot per year, followed by Coeur d'Alene at 12 and a quarter, and Post Falls at 10.02. This retail building, constructed in 1966, was demolished in favor of new construction at a great location on East Sherman. The MLS reported the site to be 0.39 acres, and given the selling price, that equates to $38.56 a square foot for that site. It is reported that townhomes, I've heard 4 townhomes, will be built on this Sherman Avenue site. Built in 1920, this was formerly a Montgomery Ward Wiggett antique building in a great Coeur d'Alene location. The main floor, 8,332 square feet, and also a second and third floor totaling 8,417 square feet. Currently going through extensive remodeling, this building will now be used for office, according to the new owners. The basement lacked utility at the time of sale, was not included in the value calculation. However, the owners intend to fully remodel that basement, and it will be put into productive use by the new owners. Another great retail location from 1909, this building has a main floor of 1,459 square feet and an upstairs apartment and workspace area of 1,500 square feet. A nice retail location on North 4th Street, built in 1977, was sold. Here is an unreported restaurant sale. The China Dragon restaurant on West Apple was sold to a new owner that reopened the Chinatown restaurant after a brief closure for remodeling. This former Elks building sat vacant for many years and was sold and completely remodeled. It is now known as the Innovation Den, a home for innovators with over 6,000 square feet of open space, work areas, and a private club known as the Lair. Robotics development and other advanced innovations are practiced by the entrepreneurial occupants of the den. Now for a few examples of new retail construction. This building at the crossings on West Appleway is nearing completion and will be the home of Firehouse Subs with a few additional spaces available to lease. This retail cash and carry food outlet was recently completed on West Appleway near Wendy's. This Hayden site near the northeast corner of Honeysuckle and Government has been cleared for a new restaurant that will start construction this year. There are various new restaurants open throughout our county, and many of them are listed here. We did not try to find all of them, so there are likely others that you can think of that are not listed. New restaurants are a strong part of our current retail environment, especially in our county, as we've seen, that attracts so many retirees over the age of 65. Gross retail sales of all kinds continue their upward trend. E-commerce sales currently account for around 10% of the total. The retail sales environment continues to evolve as consumer shopping preferences change. The days of the large, multi-department retail store is on the decline, while other forms of retail marketing, like e-commerce shown here, have increased. Locally, we saw the Kmart in the adjacent office supply store close at Highway 95 in Niter and Coeur d'Alene. A new Tractor Supply company has taken the vacated office supply space, and there is currently no activity seen at the closed Kmart store. The Sears building in Coeur d'Alene currently has a pre-closure sale sign posted on the front. A few smaller stores in our area, Mother's Haven and Nana Max, have already closed. Both Mother's Haven and Nana Max continue to operate as internet sellers, finding the cost of a retail outlet store was not economic for them, following the national trend. For 2018, we will continue to see evolution and growth in the retail sector. While retail sales increases are likely to continue, the mode of delivery of the retail product appears to be shying away from the brick and mortar stores when possible. Retail rental rates will remain steady with some upward pressure. New construction will be primarily for restaurants, gas stations, and specialty retail. It is not conducive to online marketing sales, like the 11 new restaurants we mentioned today. This concludes my portion of the program, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much, Doug. Our next topic is industrial and land, and our presenter is Mr. Rob Canopin.
I'm happy to be here today. I've really been impressed with two things. One is Sam Wolkenhauer. When I was sitting there, it just really impressed upon me that that young man is going places. It'll be interesting to watch his future. Really cool stuff. The other is, if you've been able to not go to the bathroom this long, it's a major accomplishment. All right, expansion and growth. 2017 was an amazing year for industrial and land. Some of the positive forces that continue to fuel the economic expansion include steady job growth, a booming housing market, strong consumer confidence, low interest rates, low fuel prices, and the recent surge in the stock market. Here is a chart that reflects the nationwide absorption of existing industrial space, current vacancy rates, and new deliveries in major markets in the U.S. As we can see, industrial space is being absorbed and vacancies continue to be at record lows nationwide. However, we have potential headwinds. Geopolitical risk, inflationary pressure, rising interest rates, and labor issues. All these headwinds will continue to act as a damper on an economy that may otherwise grow too fast. Let's jump into e-commerce, which has been a big engine for industrial growth. In just 5 years, e-commerce distribution space demand has grown from less than 5% of North American leasing to about 20% of all new leasing in North America. Online sales in the U.S. represent 9.3% of total retail sales, and online sales are growing 4 times faster than traditional retail sales, demonstrating the potential for further growth and disruption. A significant and growing share of online sales are general merchandise, apparel and accessories, furniture, and other sales commonly referred to as GAFO, which represents merchandise normally sold in department stores and typically require warehousing and distribution. These sales represent about 27% of all U.S. online transactions. It is clear that in the paradigm of an online world, the interaction that a retailer has with the customer often occurs on the retailer's website and on the customer's doorstep. So here is a local example. This is a 22,000 square foot concrete tilt-up building that we sold 5 years ago to an investor on a sale leaseback. The aerospace defense contractor tenant, he relocated upon lease expiration to a new facility. We then leased the premises in the spring of 2017 to an e-commerce tenant, Nanomax. Nanomax is a boutique that specializes in trendy women's clothing and uses various forms of social media, including Facebook, YouTube, and Pinterest, to market their products worldwide. They're doing extremely well. They did begin with traditional bricks and mortar and a small retail shop in Riverstone, but they, like so many, have abandoned the idea of serving a few when they have the avenue of the internet to serve so many. Here we can see that Nanomax ranks number 362 on the Inc. 5000 list and number 21 for top retail companies, and they continue to grow all through e-commerce related sales. Here is another e-commerce company, Shabby Fabrics. They initially moved into this 9,800 square foot building on Schreiber Way about 4 years ago from a smaller facility in Spokane. But their business kept growing. Eventually they decided to build and own. They now occupy this brand new 17,800 square foot building on Schreiber Way in Coeur d'Alene, just across from their former location. Shabby Fabrics is an interesting company. They sell unique quilting fabrics through e-commerce. They purchase their fabric from various stateside distribution companies. These bigger companies purchase the fabric from foreign countries such as South Korea, India, and Japan in large quantities. The owners pointed out that worldwide events have a direct impact on their business. Trade agreements, tariffs, and even weather has affected their cash flows, and they can track the various events by the ebbs and flows of sales from distinct areas of the world. So, Shabby Fabrics is owned by a husband and wife who are both commercial airline pilots. They now employ 49 people, and they attribute the bulk of their success to their in-house design team that takes the acquired fabric and creates new designs by weaving multiple fabrics together. These new fabrics become Shabby Fabrics exclusive and are then marketed and sold to the quilting users worldwide. Again, 100% of their sales are through the internet. They grew their business organically through eBay and then used social media. Facebook, they have 200,000 followers, and YouTube, they have 120,000 subscribers. So they are now at the point where they not only sell to retail customers, they also sell to wholesalers and distribution companies worldwide, all with that exclusive Shabby Fabrics logo. Another example of an expanding e-commerce company in our region is Dollar Fulfillment. Dollar now occupies this 20,000 square foot warehouse distribution facility near the airport in Hayden. Dollar Fulfillment ships various items to consumers worldwide. For example, you might be a consumer in California and order a book from one of the many internet websites, and that book just might be shipped from the Dollar Fulfillment Center in Hayden. Lease rates in our region are oftentimes significantly less than major market or coastal lease rates. Hence, it made sense for Dollar to expand to North Idaho. Business-to-business e-commerce is also growing rapidly. Business-to-business e-commerce describes electronic commerce between business at the level of manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. One example of a business-to-business e-commerce company that is expanding in our region is High Mountain Forest Products. We moved High Mountain into this 10,600 square foot Celtice Way location about 5 years ago. However, High Mountain recently purchased this 33,000 square foot building located at 3858 Schreiber Way for $1.8 million in April of 2017. High Mountain Forest Products is another interesting company. They're a hardwood lumber distribution company. They purchase their hardwood from large mills in the Midwest and then coordinate the shipments to Coeur d'Alene by either truck or rail. They then bundle that material in smaller units and ship to local and regional companies. Those companies, like Huntwood, for example, then use the hardwood to build various types of furniture. Interestingly, when I spoke to the owner of High Mountain, he was in the country of Turkey. I learned that he also owns a worldwide lumber distribution company that imports hardwood from Russia and other foreign countries. So he uses his worldwide company to sell product to his regional company, but he also sells to his other hardwood companies that he does not own. Pretty cool stuff. Another business-to-business e-commerce company is Orgill. In 2017, they purchased the 500,000 square foot former Kimball project. Orgill is a leading independent distributor of more than 60,000 home improvement projects, ranging from hand and power tools, hardware, lumber, paint, and building materials, etc. They supply retailers such as Lowe's, Home Depot's, Ace Hardware, and many other retailers countrywide. However, business is so good, we recently leased them this 20,000 square foot building on 500 West Dalton in Coeur d'Alene. And rumor has it that they're still looking for more space. So let's transition to some local manufacturing companies. Here's a 16,000 square foot building that was developed and occupied by Advanced Cabinets, who is a local and regional cabinet company that supplies cabinets for residential and commercial properties. However, after several years of occupancy, Advanced Cabinets outgrew their space. Like others who are in a growth mode, they were having to turn down a significant amount of business due to lack of production space. So we helped them sell their Chelsea Court building so they could acquire and expand into the 23,900 square foot former Odom distribution building located at 250 West Anton. Advanced Cabinets purchased this project in the spring of 2017. While Advanced Cabinets was moving into this new building, we were able to lease the front 8,000 square feet of their former Chelsea Court property to Candela Construction Company, who is also expanding their operations in our region. However, where did Odom go since they moved out of 250 West Anton? They now occupy this 90,000 square foot newly constructed building just south of Lancaster and employ nearly 100 people in Hayden, Idaho. Interestingly, in early 2017, we also sold the 15 acres just south of the new Odom facility to Ken Ela of Warren K for future expansion of the Warren K Industrial Park. Now let's take a look at some other small businesses that have expanded. Here are 4 very similar buildings that were recently purchased and are leased by expanding companies. The 10157 North Terran Street is an 8,100 square foot building and was purchased by Selkirk Construction for roughly $93 per square foot. Selkirk moved out of the building they leased at 10024 North Tarney, which we shortly thereafter leased to Salmon Electric, who has 8 or 9 offices throughout the West and has chosen to expand to our area. And just west of Highway 95 is 11917 North Warren Street. It's a 7,600 square foot building that was purchased by BC Engineering at $85 per square foot. And finally, the 11837 North Tracy is a 7,500 square foot building that was purchased by Black's Rain Gutters at roughly $70 a foot. So let's look at some significant land sales. This 202 acre land parcel near the state line was purchased several years ago by some investors who went through the laborious process of entitling the property to create 5 acre industrial lots, each with access to a newly created private water system that will serve at least 38 lots. However, we sold the entire project in 2017 to a vertical developer who has already sold 5 lots and just finished building the first project at Bighorn. This 18,000 square foot building was a build-to-suit for critical power and has many amenities, including steel construction, 20-foot high ceilings, 16-foot doors, plenty of power, a nice loading dock, all on 5 acres. Critical Power is also expanding their operations and chose to relocate to Idaho from Washington. Okay, back to land sales. Parker Subaru purchased this well-located 2-acre parcel on Government Way for future expansion. Some of you may have noticed their new electronic sign on the corner of Government Way and Clayton. Here are 2 land sales out by Cabela's and Walmart. Both projects will have 12,000 square foot buildings built on them. Parcel A will be the future home of California Closets, who is expanding operations and also relocating from Washington. Parcel B will be the new expansion headquarters for a blood platelet and refrigeration cooling company. Another company that is expanding is Fox Trailers. Here they initially purchased the 4.8 acres on Pleasant View, just north of I-90 for $2.90 per square foot. And then they purchased the adjacent 2.9 acres for roughly $3 per square foot. This 3/4 acre parcel just south of the freeway sold to Burt Klein's Restoration for $556 per square foot as they purchased the project for freeway signage and possible future expansion of the already existing business located on the adjacent parcel. Finally, Idaho Central Credit Union purchased 2.4 acres of high exposure land on Appleway to house their new North Idaho corporate headquarters. This project will be their 3rd location in Kootenai County that they have developed over the last 2 years. In summary, we do believe that the industrial market will continue to experience growth in 2018. We have seen very little new spec development over the last 10 years. However, since most of the functional space has been leased or sold, industrial space has been leased or sold, we will see several, and we're aware of several spec projects that will be coming out of the ground in 2018. So on the one hand, we have this big demand from all unit sizes, from 1,500 square feet to 40,000 square feet. On the other hand, it's very expensive to build right now. It's at historic highs. So in order for these projects to make sense, lease rates are going to have to achieve historic highs also. So the issue becomes, what will the absorption be like and what will the lease rates be like? We do feel that all of these new projects, or whoever dares to build, that space will be absorbed. The issue for the investor or the developer will be at what lease rate? What are they going to be able to achieve? Our best guess is that probably slightly lower than they may anticipate, but we're hoping for the best, and we'll certainly know that answer next year, so stay tuned for next year's presentation. Thank you very much.
Come on up here, Wayne. So our last topic is going to be on investments, and I think Wayne it was going to be his last year, but now he's back. So welcome, Wayne Burton.
Thanks, Mark. It's been a long morning. I don't know about you, but my watch told me to move twice. Somebody might remember, like Mark pointed out, I invoked the rule number 70 last year from NCIS. It went like this. Finally, everybody here know the NCIS show, and Gibbs has his rules. Well, there's rule number 70. If you don't know what that is, it says that when you turn 70, you don't have to do this darn segment again. And I turned 70 this year. Thanks, folks. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. How the heck did I get to this segment again? The answer is, drum roll, Mark has a reputation for being very persuasive. Last fall, he walked into my office. Do you know the last time I saw Mark in my office without an agenda? We were both wearing leisure suits. He commented, looked out the window and commented, what a great view of the river you have here. And in the same breath, he mentioned that he's having a hard time filling the basement office. It reminded me how I volunteered in the Marines. I was told to keep this segment short, and so last year, I forecasted, the forecast that I had for last year for 2017, we met. This year's will be more of the same. Thanks a lot, folks. Credit for this clock goes to Rob Canopin. He put it up here on the screen many years ago. We've been using it ever since to start this segment. It gives a view of where the economy is at. We've also Rob coined a new long high. This is in reference to commercial market, CRE market, not the state of Washington, also known as SOW cannabis market. I'll get back to the long high and explanation of that in a few minutes. I'm skipping, I know that's a little slow on uptake. I'm skipping numerous slides and economic reporting due to Sam's earlier presentation, and there's no way I could top that. The stock market is on unprecedented rise. This has generated a sense of instability and concern of risk for investors. Duh, I wrote this before this week. Commercial real estate is now perceived as a means to diversify their investments. Vacancies are down, rents are increasing, and inventory is low, all the makings of a seller's market. We are in the third year of an 18-year pattern. The major markets have not slowed down. The foot is still on the accelerator. Certainly some areas are weaker than others. There are some headwinds, however, and these could cause a rise in interest rates, and that in turn put pressure on cap rates. We are the recipients of the low cap rates and low inventory in the major markets. Last year, those markets were selling at unprecedented 5% cap rates. The sellers in that market are forced to look at markets like ours to secure a higher return on their investment. 1031 exchanges are back to or exceeding pre-recession levels. Yet another driver that is pushing a strong sales in our market. I'm finding that buyers have changed from the last up market. Most of them, certainly not all, we don't all learn our lessons, have a strong memory from the last downturn. They are more cautious this time around and will take a tax consequence rather than purchase a project that does not make sense. In all up markets, there will be sellers who have inflated expectations for their projects. Hey, I do it all the time. In this type of market, buyers and sellers should strongly consider using a professional banker, appraiser, CRE broker, their accountants. They all have a vested interest in helping you to purchase wisely and sell wisely. Over the years, we've witnessed time and again that the professionals find the market value of projects and the seller rejects the logic and/or methodology behind the value analysis. I personally watch a project like this. The following example is anecdotal, but all too common pattern, unfortunately. The project started in 2005 at $2.5 million. It was projected to sell at about $250,000 less than that. After numerous offers came in at the expected, below the expected sale price, at the expected sale price, and rejected, after many price changes, always chasing the market, it sold some 7 years later at $900,000. Interesting, that particular seller was going to put his money in gold. During that period of time, he would have quadrupled his money. I believe a good market does not mean overpriced projects will sell. The local results, this represents a total of all commercial sales as reported in MLS for Kootenai County. Let's take a moment and put this in perspective. Good projects, priced right, with little to no deferred maintenance and a documented financial history, do not, I repeat, not go on the open market. Therefore, they don't end up in these results. I estimated in last year's presentation that in 2016, 50% of sold projects were not reported MLS. This year, our brokerage pegs that number closer to 72%. Factoring that number into the Kootenai County commercial sales volume for 2017, our volume would be closer to $80 million. That's phenomenal. More than anything, the MLS results are used to reflect the trends, ups or downs, and percentage of this change. Can you believe that we have an increase of 24%? Just 4 years ago, I would have given my firstborn for a 4% increase. Could hit the right button. This slide shows the list price to sold compared. I like to put this one up so it shows the gap to measure between what we're thinking, wishful thinking, and what the market says. When comparing the list price at 100%, it's what we have it on the market for, to the sold and assessed value, you see the listed values where the seller's expectation of the market reality is on average higher by 7%. This has held steady for at least the last 3 years. The county assessed value lagged 30% behind the listing and a whole 23% behind what it sold for. Not unexpected, the assessed value will chase the market. How many of you have used the assessed value, I know I have, as a baseline for purchase analysis? If so, you might want to rethink and use this chart to help adjust your value of that property based on the assessed value. Another trending chart, surprisingly, industrial lagged behind office and retail. The gap between office and industrial can in part be attributed to the backlog of office listings and a scarcity of industrial. This is a great slide. Last year, I said that 2016, the listed days at 218 days on the market, we were absorbing a whole boatload of what I refer to as the Wayne Burton Memorial listings. They've been around a long time. So the inventory we've absorbed those, the inventory has decreased, and days on the market have dramatically improved. We have finally sold off most of the projects from the downturn. Buyers are chasing good, solid, income-producing projects. The fringe ones are selling, but we usually need some reduction in price due to issues such as deferred maintenance, conditions, lack of clean and clear financials, a host of other buyer objections. In summary, for 2017, the long high, as I define, come back to that, as a market where the ups and downs are marginal, rates are good, and expectations are to continue for the foreseeable future. Commercial market in our area has finally caught up to the residential segments. For commercial to hit its stride, it took closer to 3 years rather than a normal 2 behind the residential market. Let's take a look at what was forecast for 2017. Next year, I won't have to do this part. and take a reflective look at that. The national growth, while there was a solid improvement from 2016, it did not quite hit my mark. So I didn't put a check on that. Suppose by reporting 2.6% in the fourth quarter of last year, I should put a half check there. I was a little aggressive on that forecast. Loan rates, the market is tracking up from historic lows, check. Boomers and millennials have taken center stage, check. Millennials from recreation, clothing, and housing, they are driving the industry. I, for one, am glad to see this transition happening. I'm tired of hearing about the boomers. I've been around since the very beginning, the very first year of them. Unemployment. There are record lows across the board. It does not appear that any group is being left out. Job participation, as I pointed out earlier, there has definitely been some improvement that this very important segment of our economy has a ways to go. Cap rates, reduced cap rates did drive up increase in values. Here we go, drum roll, 2018 forecast. National growth will reach 2.6%. Yes, I'm doubling down on that one. Loan rates, if we had 5 or 6% rate on commercial loan rates just 10 years ago, I frankly would have taken a banker out for lunch. Vacancy, today's rental rates have not caught up with the cost of new construction, so a low inventory will continue. Sales volume, shortage of projects, listings will have the many picking over the few projects available. However, demand will drive an increase in sales. It almost doesn't make sense, but I still believe that we're going to see an increase in those sales this year. Cap rates, as long as the interest rates hold or show only a small increase, the cap rates will not increase. Reminder, cap rates increase, the value goes down. I got to digress a minute here. My wife told me don't ad lib, but I'm doing it right now when I left this morning. 2011, I put this on, and for those that were here, you remember, I had nothing good to say. So I spent half of this presentation teaching everybody how you get cap rates and how you do investments, not talking about the market. Isn't this great? I can talk about the market. 2011, we said that you keep your powder. This was interesting. I didn't say this, but someone in our group did. And as a sales brokerage company, we said keep your powder dry in 2011, take care of your tenants. We knew sales were not on a prospect for at least that year or the foreseeable future. For 2018, I want to leave you with this. If you have a project and you are contemplating selling, now is the time to do that. Thank you, and Mark, by the way, I have moved to my home office.
Thank you all for hanging in there with us. I know it's a long set. We appreciate it. First of all, I would like to once again thank each and every one of you for coming and spending your morning with us. You are why we do this, and we appreciate your attendance. Special thanks to Sam, Dr. Schulz, for incredibly good, interesting, and useful presentations. I'd like to once again re-thank our sponsors who have been helping us do this for the last 11 years. Our sales team, who work really hard at this, the men and women of Coldwell Banker and our commercial department, spend a lot of time at this. They are the heart of why this works and probably why most of you are interested in here. You guys and ladies make us proud every day, and I personally thank you and personally appreciate all the effort you spend on this. We also have some wonderful staff people that help make this work. Kelsey and Jolene, could you come up for just a second? These ladies help coordinate everything we're doing here, and we're very proud of them and most appreciative of how hard they work to try to make us look good and not do something silly, and they usually succeed. So we have flowers for each of them. Thank you so much. Last thing I have this morning, on behalf of Coldwell Banker, please accept our best for 2018. Hope it's your best year ever. Consider yourself invited already, right now, to this event. Next year, as we try this for a 12th time, one of these years we're going to get it right. Thank you for coming. Drive safe.